Welcome to the Human Evolution Podcast, where we dive deep into the science, philosophies, and strategies that create real and lasting change. I'm Ori Goldstein, and here we leave traditional self-help behind and map the real terrain of true personal development.
So the funny part about my retreat that starts a week from the day that we're recording this episode is that it's a different facility from yours, and they've got like a different packing list. I mean, the same instructor, same people, same organization, different facility because you did yours in Georgia and I'm doing mine up here in Michigan, and the packing list is a little. They're like, bring flashlights, bring
Yeah,
warm
mine said that too.
clothes. Okay,
Mine
good.
said
They
that
said
too. Good.
okay because I was like, is this going to be? And it's totally fine because it is at a proper Buddhist temple of all things. They actually have one here in Michigan. I don't know how, but um, is it going to be like in the courtyard? And I'm like looking at the packing list, and I'm going to take a lot of luggage. Like I have like my travel luggage that I've traveled the world with. I have these two massive rolling duffel bags, and I'm like, what are they going to do about it? Like I'd rather have more than I need. Did you show up with a whole bunch of shit? How'd
Take
you do
it,
it?
do it the exact opposite way. Think
Yeah.
about this as being 10 days that you're going to be in an uncomfortable situation as is. So make
Hmm.
yourself as comfortable as possible. I took with a huge suitcase, plus pillows, plus my meditation bench, plus everything.
Okay, good.
There's no reason in the world why you should in any way make yourself uncomfortable.
Yeah, okay, that's good to hear because my initial thought was I don't want to be the guy that rolls in here with because I do have some massive luggage. But I'm like, I'm reading the part about bringing my own bedding, which I'm totally cool with doing, but I'm like,
hmm
bedding takes up a lot of fucking room, so
Well,
I'm gonna
when you
fill
say
a whole
bedding,
bag on that.
all you really need is to bring with an actual cover for the mattress and a pillow cover. Like everything else, they will give you a blanket you can bring with your own. And Joy, for example, bought with one that she used to meditate with every single day. So like you can actually have it there. But my guess is that they're going
Mm.
to have everything there you need. Because what happens is, and you'll probably do the same, I did it, at the end of the 10 days, you're just going to end up leaving the bedding for like the next group of students. And so
Yeah.
they've got a lot of donations over time. So
Okay.
everything you need will be there for you. Few things I would say are absolute essentials are you want to have shoes that are easily taken off and put back on because you are running back and forth from places, and a lot of places are no shoes territory. Like this is one of the times that Crocs are probably the best thing in the world.
How about my manatee slippers?
I think
How
they
about
are
these?
fantastic. I
The
think they are
manatee wearing a
fantastic.
bikini.
No one cares what you look like. No one really even looks at you.
I'm in a process of notifying people that I'll be out, and not only will I be out, but I'll be out without contact. Most trips I take, and I like it this way.
You can still
I
answer.
Yeah, I still answer, and I still like to keep up with things so that I'm not coming back, because it makes me anxious to come back from a trip to a whole bunch of stuff. I would rather chip away at it a little while I'm gone. I know some people are like, hey, when I go on a vacation, I don't want to get any messages or whatever. I'm not like that. I would rather at least like, all right, this is handled. Everything's good to go. Because it doesn't hurt me to check 10 minutes a day. But I do have to let everybody know this time, like, hey, it's going to be complete, like, out of it.
So curious to hear you at the end of it because this is going to be something that is going to be running around in your head for at least the first 2 days of like, oh shit, I forgot to do something, or what if Ori needs to get a hold of me, or one of my other clients needs to get a hold of me, or something.
Yeah.
And I really want you, this is me as the hypnotist talking, as your coach talking. I really want you to sit with that and not let it go away. I want you to sit with it and figure out what the heck is inside of you that feels such a need to be a people pleaser in that way because
Yeah.
that will be a very large form of your healing. And I'm excited to, after the fact, actually work with you on it and just, if nothing, if it hasn't completely resolved, to completely knock it out the ballpark for you.
I've only had probably a cell phone in my pocket as an adult because they were just coming out. I mean, I had one when I turned 16, but it was the bag. And then,
Yeah, of course.
when I was in the Marine Corps in DC, they started coming out with smaller phones, and I actually had one in my pocket at some point. I was probably 20 years old by the time I carried one daily. And then, of course,
hmm
the internet and the Blackberries, they showed up a few years after that. So it's been really just my entire adult life. So I'm really looking forward to that part of it, just being disconnected as well, because that's a big thing. And then, of course, whatever happens mentally, that'll be great too.
And the biggest thing is just, it's just approach the whole thing with curiosity. He'll talk about this during the introductory speeches, etc. But a lot of stuff is going to be going on in your head that is going to be driving you crazy. And you've got two choices in that moment. And it took me until day 3 to finally realize the fact that it was actually a choice, is that your voices can either drive you crazy or you can get to know these voices and actually make friends with them. And so you will have your voice going inside of your head going like, oh my God, I don't know what to do without a cell phone, or oh shit, I need to reach out to someone, or what happens if something is going on? And instead of just sitting there and trying to like just excuse it away and to kind of like soothe yourself, sit with it and get to know that part inside of yourself for the first time. Get to know what it's about, figure out how it started. Like really, really sit with it and get to know who the heck you are at the deepest level that you usually hide away from yourself.
I love the way you put that, because going back to the cell phone thing, which I'm just using that as like a marker on
Simple
life.
example.
You and I are of the age where we grew up without the internet. Like we were kids without the internet or cell phones. And then we transitioned. That's why I think we're lucky, because I love my technology and everything like that. But like my son is 22, and they do a study. I'm going to butcher this, but they were like, where people our age can put our phone down and get away from it, and it bothers us, but we're like, okay. But then some younger generations now, it literally is like a compulsory, like you don't understand, like this is my whole life, like it's like devastating. Whereas for us, it's just an annoyance. So I'm really excited to get away from things in that regard. Talking about getting to know myself, what is men don't really mature until we're 25. And I remember quite clearly being in my late 20s when something just clicked in my head, and I'm like, oh, I get it now. Because up until then, I was just immature. I mean, I thought I was the shit because I'd been in the military. Then I had a badge and a gun when I was 22 years old. I thought I was a big deal. And then years later, you hear about the prefrontal cortex developing later in boys. I didn't know that at the time. And I'm like, I do remember the year. I think I was like 27 when I'm like, something just felt different. Like the texture of my mind was different. So when you say like, take time to get to know yourself, I'm like, that's interesting, because I don't remember who I was without a cell phone and distractions or anything. So this is going to be like a multi-level mind fuck, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's exciting though. It's exciting and
If you
scary at
allow
the
it
same
to
time.
be, if you allow it
Yeah.
to be, it will definitely be a multi-level mindfuck. And I really, really hope you go down to that level.
Yeah.
And I mean, just knowing you well enough, it seems like you're the person that wants to explore. So I am
Yeah.
very curious to hear the other side of it. But you
Yeah.
actually mentioned something earlier that's always been an interesting thing for me, and I've often discussed this with my clients. So you said when you were about 27, you discovered that you were mature. And I got an interesting question for you, and I just want you to think about it for a second. Like, I mean, whoever's listening, please go ahead and do the same. What is your definition of maturity? What does maturity mean to you when you were 27? What shifted?
So now we're going to turn this into three prong. I love this. I love this because I remember being a kid, and also, so I'll spin this off a little bit. So remember, like in a previous recording, we were talking about like sociopathic things. I've actually done a
Absolutely.
couple evaluations, and like we said that there's a spectrum. And actually, when I talk to you about it, you're like, "Yeah, what's the big fucking deal? Everybody's on the spectrum." So like, I score pretty high on all those things, but I register with, and this is going to be like a lot of personal information, but who cares? But I register with a lot of those things, like just being disconnected from certain things. And there's a book that just came out. Her name's Patrick Gagne. It's called The Memoir of a Sociopath, and she's been diagnosed, and she wrote up from her childhood about not really caring about rules, kind of feeling outside herself. I know I'm supposed to react this way in the situation, but I don't feel this way. Not being evil, not hurting anybody. So anyway, I've done a bunch of those little online tests, in so much as those are accurate and whatever. That's been really interesting this last week, because I've been listening to her audiobook, and I'm like, oh my God, this is me. But in a good way, like in a like, oh, okay, there's shitloads of people like this out there. I remember probably it was maybe 7, 8, 9 years old, and I finally made that switch where I started to care about my parents, where like up until a certain point, like they're just here, like these are my parents, they're supposed to take care of me. And then I'm like I'm worried about them now. And I remember specifically, it was probably later than most kids, because I know we go through those developmental phases where when you're like Dispenza talks about this, where you're really young and you just care about like, give me food. I don't give a shit about anything else around me. Then at a certain
Maslow's
point you get,
hierarchy.
yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah. And then I remember being around 7, 8, or 9, because my dad was in law enforcement, and I remember starting to worry about him when he would go to work. And before that, I didn't fucking care. Like, he's gone out working all night. What do I care? And this was way back in the day when there weren't that many cops around, and his radio didn't, like, it was very dangerous back then. It's dangerous now, but
That's actually an interesting point because that is not what you should be feeling when you're 7, 8, 9 years old. That's actually very, very interesting because
yeah,
at that age, what you should be feeling is feeling safe and secure and not worrying that dad won't come home one day. That is
yeah,
actually, it's a fear of abandonment that's created that actually starts showing up in other places in a person's life.
that's
I mean,
interesting.
fear of abandonment happens to many of us, don't get me wrong. It's not to say that what happened to you is bad or anything else. But for a 7-year-old to be afraid daddy won't come home, think about that. Do you actually
Yeah.
want a 7-year-old to have those kinds of thoughts? And you call that maturity, and what I call that is trauma. It's like it's when you really boil it down, it's like it's to a 7-year-old, the fear of dad not coming home is not just, oh gosh, dad's going to die, as it might be for a 30, 40-year-old. It's a matter
Mhm.
of, I don't even know if we'll survive. And that fear
Yeah.
of not being able to survive is a very dangerous thing to have stuck in a 7-year-old's head. So to take that into the concept of sociopathy, that actually makes a lot of sense, because what happens is, as a 7-year-old, as you're sitting there thinking like, oh gosh, what happens if dad doesn't come home? What happens is there's a part inside of you that becomes really, really afraid. And one of the easiest ways to get over fear, it's as I call fight, flight, or freeze, is the freeze sensation, which basically locks you away from your emotions. And so what happens there in that moment is, because the 7-year-old was afraid dad isn't going to come home, whereas up until, like, let's just say age 6, you were just like, dad is there, everything is good, I get to feel whatever I want. When you're 7 and you're going, oh gosh, dad might not come home, you go, I don't want to feel that, that's dangerous, I might die if that happens, I don't know what will happen next. And you shut off your emotions. And from that point forth, you never allow yourself to get very close to other people. And it shuts down an empathetic response inside of you too, which is what would possibly be associated with sociopathy. Apathy. I apologize
Yeah.
for that. But when you don't allow yourself to feel empathetic, you sit there thinking I'm a sociopath. And what could be a more logical conclusion of it is, a 7-year-old was so afraid of connecting to someone and then that person going away, because to a 7-year-old that meant death, that what that means to me is I just cut off from connecting with people too deeply.
That's very interesting, because over the years I've moved around a lot and just had different jobs. So I've had different groups of friends. Like I had my Marine Corps friends, my friends in law enforcement, and just friends in different, not just jobs, but in places. And then friends through relationships. I've had a lot of long-term relationships, like romantic relationships, and I've gotten to know all her friends, and then we've broken up, and I'm just like, that sucks. But I literally, and I actually, my current girlfriend is like, how come like you don't talk to any of your old friends? Like, I doesn't even cross my mind. And I've even had old friends of mine, like my ones in Florida, that I'm going to come see when I come down, and I'll meet up with you when I'm down there. Like a lot of times they'll be like, "Oh man, we miss you so much," and I'm just like it just makes me so uncomfortable, because I'm like, yeah, because I'm like, I know what I'm supposed to say
This
right here, but I just don't even think about it. But I do remember though, because when you're a little kid about that age, or at least when I was, that's when like we had access to the 4 channels on TV, and you watch a bunch of like law enforcement stuff, and you see cops getting killed, and of course that's what my dad did. So like all those things started to connect in my brain, and that makes a lot of sense, because I'm very good at compartmentalizing. I'll have a blast with somebody and become like best friends with them, and then a couple weeks later, if I
out of
don't see
sight, out
them,
of mind.
yeah, and look, and if I met back up with them again tomorrow, we would pick it right back up again. But I don't fucking think about that person at all while I'm away from.
Yeah. So in my history, like I'm not going to make this too much about me, because I actually want to continue on with you, is throughout most of my childhood, we moved around a lot. So
Sure.
I got used to the concept of not having people permanently in my life. And I remember like one of my best friends from childhood, like she would tell me like, you know what, I grew up with this kid, like we used to be in nursery school together. My brain couldn't even conceptualize the thought of knowing a person since nursery school. It's just my brain couldn't put it together because we moved around so much. And so the interesting thing about the brain is when it actually, so you watch the law enforcement shows or however it came along for you, you watch these law enforcement shows and something inside of your brain says, oh gosh, dad could die. Instead of at that point in time, in a completely utopic society, obviously this never happens for anyone on this level, that you walk up to dad and you go, dad, I'm afraid you would die. And dad says, do you know what? You're going to be okay. You're safe. And actually calms down that fear response inside of you. You decide, I'm going to be a tough kid, I'm going to be strong, whatever it is, and I'm going to deal with it. And the way that you learn to deal with it is creating that barrier between you and other people to some degree, which is how it starts showing up in terms of, and same for me, I'm in no way saying that this isn't my case, but you start creating that element of not really deeply connecting or caring for people at a deep level long term, because there's that fear that they're going to disappear.
Hmm.
Now, the interesting thing about the unconscious mind, and I'm kind of like motor mouthing through it, but I just love this stuff. The interesting thing about the unconscious mind is when you fear something, the best way for the unconscious mind to deal with it is to always keep some tiny element of it present. So, for example, if you've got a phobia of spiders, there's going to be some tiny element of you at the deepest recesses of your mind, wherever you go, that's going to be super alert for any spiders around. So it's going to create a little bit of the poison, kind of like the homeopathic aspect. It's like with a little bit of the poison, we can always make sure that we're safe. So if I'm really afraid of spiders, if I'm always aware of them, I know where they are and I know I'm safe. In the same way, if I'm afraid that people are going to leave me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the sense inside of myself of always feeling to some degree a little bit abandoned and a little bit alone. So anywhere I go, if it ever really happens, I've kind of inoculated myself to it.
Yeah.
And what really needs to happen, and this is like the number one tenet of my core philosophy, is you are immature. And basically what really needs to happen is you need to understand the fact that you've got a 7-year-old kid that's afraid of daddy dying. And I know that this sounds so crazy, but like really conceptualize the fact that you have a 7-year-old kid inside of you that is literally afraid of dying if someone leaves you driving your bus. And so what happens is you start developing quote unquote sociopathic tendencies of not really connecting with people. People leave your life and you couldn't care less to some degree, but when you're around them, you feel great because when you're around them, the kid is no longer scared because they're here right now. But the moment that they're gone, your 7-year-old puts up the shield and says, well, I don't need to think about them too much because if they never come back, I don't want to feel that pain of what would happen. And what really needs to happen.
It. When I'm around people that I care about, like I feel great. And then as soon as they're gone, there's no in between for me. Like I mentioned, like my friends will be like, oh my gosh, like, how are you doing? I can't wait to see you. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I'll see you 10 years from now. Like, it's literally like that. Like when you're in the room with me, this is great. And otherwise, like no thoughts whatsoever, and I'm like, this can't be right.
It's not necessarily can or can't be right. It's really just a matter of understanding the fact that there's a little kid inside of you that is terrified. And you're walking around with a level of anxiety, and the kid, in order to deal with that anxiety, is creating a little bit of the poison on a daily basis. So I don't want to feel too close to people. So what I do is I don't want to feel people leaving me. So what I do is I don't allow myself to become too close to people. If they're around, I don't really give a shit. Life is good. Everything is great. But then the moment that they're out of my mind, at the moment that they're out of sight, I'm going to disconnect from them. Mm-hmm. And it is it's a logical thing when you think about it from that point of view. And all that really takes, and I'm so excited for you to be on this retreat. And if not on this retreat, you and I need to deal about this separately. But all that really needs to happen is for you, just as much as you would have done for your son when he was 7 years old, is to sit down with him and with that part inside of yourself and sit there saying, I get you're scared. I absolutely get that you're scared. And it makes perfect sense. Like you were watching these shows on TV, you were seeing cops dying, and your dad was a cop. Mm-hmm. Of course, you were scared dad was going to die too. And because you were so scared, and dad dying for you wasn't just a matter of a goldfish in my fish tank dying. This was a matter of the one person that creates strength in my household dying, and that means that possibly I could die. It means that I could end up being in so much trouble. I could end up being so hurt, whatever it is. You need to get that 7-year-old inside of yourself to finally, A, understand the fact that it was a logical response, but then B, over and above that, to then start feeling safe and understand that that was logical when you were 7, but you are no longer that 7-year-old.
We're about to get even far more personal here. So whoever's watching this in my family at some point, now a couple more things just clicked. My parents are 20 years older than me. My son was born when I was 21. So when I was like 7, my dad was 27. So he's not even quite there yet either. You know what I mean? So I'm not very close with my own son. Now I wasn't around when he was born, and me and my ex-wife were getting divorced, and then she got pregnant, and then we kind of hung in there for a while. I think everybody knows this. I don't think this is like going to shock anybody 20 years later. But yeah, we've just never really connected, so I'm wondering now if some of that is feeding back. And here's the thing, and that's what it goes back to, like the sociopathy stuff. I know that a lot of people that are on the spectrum there have a hard time connecting with their kids, even mothers who give birth. Like the woman in the book I was telling you about, she's like, I had 2 kids and I feel like no connection with them. She's like, I know I'm supposed to, I just don't feel that motherly love. And I'm like, shit, I've had the same experience with my own son.
Okay, so let's just call a spade a spade. Stop wondering. It is a cycle. Okay. It sounds like it's a cycle. There's no two ways about it here. Like, this is a fact. This is not something that anyone would refute in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. And what it boils down to is that part inside of you doesn't want to connect too much with someone that you could really give your heart to. So you're absolutely holding your heart back on some level because it is safer to do so. That ends up having all the symptomology of sociopathy. It's, don't get me wrong, it is a sociopathic tendency. If you were to go see a psychiatrist, they may say, yes, you know what, according to the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, you're a sociopath. I'm not saying that in a bad way or anything else, but like, I mean, you meet the criteria behaviorally to do that.
Sure.
My logic is the reason why you meet those criteria is because you have a 7-year-old deciding how you should feel about it. Like, it's really like, it's, and I say it, and so many people don't really comprehend it to the degree. So I just kind of like want to go into it a little bit deeper, just a little bit deeper.
Oh yeah.
Imagine right now, we brought a 7-year-old into that room that you're recording right now. And that 7-year-old is now the master of your emotions. Whatever he tells you to feel, we're going to inject a certain amount of hormones into you, whatever kind of neurochemicals, and that is what you're going to feel. Now, the 7-year-old is now going to completely drive your bus. He's gonna say, okay, fine, so you're gonna be around your son. I want you to feel detached, because if you feel too attached, that's dangerous. Okay, inject in detachment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. Now you're getting into a relationship. I want you to feel oxytocin. I want you to feel the connection because you're with them. And oh my God, this feels so great. And then all of a sudden the person upsets you. My God, what you need to do is you need to create a strong sense of separation from that person. Inject in a sense of separation. And it's in terms of attachment styles, that creates the avoidant personality that we discuss in attachment styles. But basically what happens is you start avoiding deep connection because the 7-year-old inside of you, literally a 7-year-old, is making decisions about how you should be feeling. And it is such a deep thing to understand the fact that when you really, really comprehend this, that a 7-year-old is deciding it, that if you had that 7-year-old in the room with you, what would you do? You would sit that 7-year-old down. You may even get stern with them with tough love and sit there saying, listen here, Tommy, I don't want you to be this way. But at the end of the day, what you really are going to do with that 7-year-old is explain to them, I get why you're so afraid. I get it. It makes perfect sense to me, because if dad had died, this would have happened, this would have happened, this would have happened. You saw absolute catastrophe happening had this happened. For you, dad dying was apocalypse now. I get it. But now what you need to do is I need you to understand the fact that you are safe. He didn't die. We made it through. I'm a 40-year-old man. I'm strong. I'm capable. I'm powerful. And now what I want to do is I want to start having relationships as a 40-year-old man. And then what happens is the dialogue begins inside of yourself, which is what you're probably going to experience over these next 10 days, especially after this conversation, of you conversing with a 10-year-old and the 10-year-old sitting there going, this is dangerous. I don't want to do this. And you sitting there going, calm down, Tommy. We're okay. We're okay. And it goes back to, and it's, I mean, I love this video so much, I always want to play it over and over again, the Good Will Hunting video. That concept of you sit there telling him he's okay, and he goes, yeah, I get it. And you go, no, Tommy, you're okay. Yeah, I get it. Listen to me. We are safe right now. Don't you mess with me, because if you mess with me, we might die. We're safe. Fuck off, Lee. I don't want to listen to you. We're safe. And it's actually getting to that point of actually having that part inside of you finally understand the fact that the trauma it experienced, the trauma of the fear it created inside of itself by believing that story, can finally go away.
This is perfect timing because I'm like listening to that audiobook. Like if I did score high, I know it's all a subjective test, right?
Dude,
like,
I'm a sociopath completely.
I don't care. He told if I came back with some really weird results, I'd be like, yeah, well, so what? I'm my age now. This is who I am. Whatever, you know. I function in society. But like literally doesn't bother me at all. I'm like, oh, cool. But so I'm glad I'm listening to that book, and I'm glad we're talking about this, because these are the kinds of things I'm like that I'll need to sit with and process. Because otherwise I probably just would have filed it away. So another thing that people notice about me, because I've had, some friends, like my friends in Fort Lauderdale, for example, I've lived with housemates there, and they knew me very well. They've been around me through a lot of years, and they'd see me in multiple different, relationships over the years, and they were like, "Oh, here he goes again!" Like it's literally to it, like almost you could set your watch to it. So many weeks into a new relationship where I just start my self-destructive behavior and just start, like blowing things up. Like, so as soon as something gets to a certain point, I swear to God, it happens every time. And like, I even know I do it now.
Has to. Do you get it?
I've even joked about it now.
It has to go that way.
Yeah.
But you understand that it has to be that way?
Yeah.
Like
I just
But like really like put it
Yeah.
into perspective for yourself. Like and I want you to continue on with your story, but I really want you to put it in perspective for yourself that if you've got a child that sees being too close to someone and that person dying becoming like a cataclysmic event, of course it's going to always go the same way. And so while you're love bombing them, while you're just in the place of just like feeling all the great connection, that's great. But as soon as your heart starts to open a bit too much, the 7-year-old is going to inject into you everything it needs to protect you.
Yep, it happens every time. Even with my girlfriend now, because this happened. As I told her, because we're old enough now to talk about these things, even though it may not make sense. I'm like, yeah, this is about that time. Because she's like, why are you being? This was a long time ago now, but she's like, why are you being so just like trying to destroy everything and just being irrational? And I'm like, oh, this is kind of what I do. Like, it was to the point where I'd done it so many times that it was almost funny. I'm like, yeah, this is when I do that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's funny though. It's funny now because it's good to recognize the pattern and everything.
There's zero funny about it, but at the same time, it's funny because it's a pattern that recreates itself. And so the question is, what do you do to change it? That is really, really the big question here. And what you do to change it is really starting to understand the fact that it's, for lack of better wording, and it's everything that we've discussed before, but I love the fact that everything is now starting to tie itself back together as it needs to. It's the concept of the 300-year experiment. It's a concept of understanding the fact that, yes, you will lose your girlfriend. Whether you die first or she dies first, you guys are not going to be together for eternity. It's the fact that, yes, your parents will die. It's the fact that, yes, friendships will end. And instead of sitting there looking at those things and sitting there going like, oh my God, that is cataclysmic, to just accept the reality of it and still feel safe and comfortable in yourself while thinking about it. It's the idea of acknowledging the worst that can happen and being okay with it. Because right now, what's going on, it's like, so let's go back to the example of the spider. Very simply. So if you are 7 years old, you walk into a room, you see a spider, or you're asleep at night and you wake up to see a spider crawling on you and it bites you. And now from now on, you're deathly afraid of spiders. What you need to do on that level, and like obviously there's very specific techniques that can be done through hypnosis, NLP, etc. But like the basic concept of it to some degree is to get to the point of understanding the fact that yes, that was a terrible experience. And because of that terrible experience, it makes perfect sense why you are afraid. First and foremost, it's acknowledging the fact that what happened to you makes sense. Because otherwise what you're doing is you're just calling the kid stupid and the kid is going to stick in its heels. So the first thing you do is you tell the kid, I get it. Makes perfect sense. This is why you are the way you are. You saw those shows. You knew what was going on with your father. You were possibly told bad stories. Maybe some bad stuff happened in your town, whatever it was. It makes sense why you were afraid. That is step one. Step two is to actually then understand the fact that if a spider comes and bites me, there's a 99% probability that it's probably just a household spider that's going to be about as bad as a mosquito bite. And in the 1% probability that is a bad spider bite, we live in a society today where there's so many places where you can get treated for spider bites that there's, on that 1% probability, there's still only a 0.1% probability that something really bad will happen to me if I treat it correctly. And so what happens is by putting it into the correct perspective, you understand the fact that you are actually extremely safe, even in the worst circumstance. And that worst circumstance is such a low probability that it becomes something that you don't need to worry about so often. So to put that in perspective for you, it's like the same thing. So in your mind, you've got a 7-year-old kid that has now taken the idea of people leaving me and has made it into a blockbuster 3D IMAX picture in your brain. It's like it is a fully immersive virtual reality experience of people leave me and I will die. And that is where the kid is living. Number one is you explain to the kid, I get it. I get why you became so afraid of it. It makes perfect sense. Number two is to step away from the movie theater and just basically say, people will leave me. Bad things will happen and I will still be okay. It's not to tell yourself it will never happen. The moment you tell yourself it's not going to happen, the little kid inside of your head says bullshit and stops listening to you. But you say, it will happen. I know for a fact it will happen. These bad things are going to happen. And do you know what? I'm going to be strong enough to deal with it. And if I'm not strong enough to deal with it, I'm going to have the resources to deal with it. And if I don't have the resources to deal with it, I'll die and it's over anyway. Whatever you need to do to actually comfort yourself enough to understand the fact that this terrible outcome that you saw might happen, might not happen, but even if it does happen, it's probably not as bad as this end of the world thing that your kid made it out to be.
Remembering those days and then being in my late 20s and kind of something clicking I can't really describe it, but there was a change. There was a shift. Then almost 10 years later, I remember I was 37 and another change happened. Like another dial was turned. I can't
37, you
even really,
said?
yeah, I just recall like, oh, I'm comfortable in my own skin now. Cause I was almost like, cause I finally hit that point in my life where I'm like, and look, I'm insecure as anybody else is on certain levels and everything else. I mean, that's never whatever, but I do recall being at that age. I'm like, none of us are making it out of here alive, so I'm just going to do what makes me happy and live my life. But I recall those specific milestones. 7, 8, 9 years old, and late 20s, then late 30s. For whatever reason, I know everybody's probably different and hit those milestones at different times. But and I've probably got another one coming too. But yeah, but this is all really, really good though to go into. Not that I wasn't going to. I'm sure my brain wasn't going to run out of stuff to think about while I was sitting there in silence for all those days. But this is good to have something to kind of point my efforts towards, because I had just written all that off, the whole detachment thing that I've just known myself to do for so many years. I had just written it off as like, I just don't have those kinds of feelings. But maybe now that it's in my head now, I can address it a little more with what's intentionally instead of
Yeah.
just like trying to move on to something else.
Like, I mean, like for
Yeah.
example, a baby that's born autistic, it's a certain amount of neurochemistry going on inside its brain. It's the way that the brain is wired. It's the way it is. I would say for you, just given what we're talking about, I don't think you were born a sociopath. I don't think that that's the case. I think that this is a learned behavior based upon certain experiences that occurred for you. It's maybe you already had a predisposition towards certain neuro circuits occurring more easily for you, whatever it was. I have no clue. But my whole point here is that I don't think that you were born a sociopath in the same way that some people might be. I
Hmm.
think that what occurred for you is that you learned a certain way of being that made you feel the safest in this world. And then your brain, in order to feel safe, like I said, it will bring up a little bit of the poison on a regular basis, and that creates distance from people in order to be able to always be safe from people leaving you. And this is a
Yeah.
great thing for you to focus on. But again, I don't want you to go in there. It's the worst thing that anyone can ever do going into any kind of meditation is to go in directly saying, this is what I'm going to deal with. You set an intention, go into the retreat. Trust me, if it needs to come up, it will. As you scan yourself, you got 10 days of ideally like 10 to 12 hours a day of meditation. Stuff is going to pop up. And when it does, it's going to just show up for you. And when it does, just deal with whatever it is that shows up for you.
So I'll tell you another
Yeah.
funny story, like in the sense that it's just something coming up that I have to do. And I'm really looking forward to it, but I'm not actively thinking about it all the time because I'm a huge like planner. I've got my bags packed already. I've got all my little things laid out that I need to take. I could do it the morning of. It's only an hour drive from here. It's not like you where you had to like travel halfway across the southeast. But
Yeah.
so I blocked it out, and I've got a couple trips coming up in the end of July, August. It's summertime up here in the Midwest, so everybody's got to do everything in the summer because like you can't. We come back here for the summers because we love it here and our families here, but it's like every weekend there's something going on. Like you don't get a break. Whereas South Florida, it's like it's warm all the time. Who cares? Point being is that I'm in my mind, I'm like running through all the cool stuff we're going to do after the retreat, and just kind of keeping this over here to the side because I guess
Perfect.
I'm going into it without any expectations. I don't want to think about it too much because why? What's the point? So there's that little weird thing going on. But to get back to your point about the sociopathy, these tests are all subjective, whatever its mental health is, and to try to quantify it with whatever that manual they use, the
Like DSM. Yeah.
yeah, DSM-9 or whatever it is now, the
Yeah.
latest version. So I don't have a problem with violence at all. I've been around a lot of violence. It doesn't bother me. Like if a fight broke out, if we're sitting at a bar in Hollywood, like if we're at Whiskey Tango or some other dive down there on the beach, and a fight broke out right next to us, I'd just be like, hey, let's just move down a little bit. Like doesn't bother me. Like some people will see a fight or they'll get into an accident or something, and the rest of their day they're just shaking. I'm like, whatever. So I don't have
Exactly.
a problem with like really fast, traumatic. Something could happen, and then 5 minutes later, I have no thought. But so that is probably a something I'm thankful for. Like when things really hit the fan, like if we're standing somewhere and somebody falls over and has a heart attack or like a fight, whatever you name it, I could be like, I get very calm, and I'm like, okay, I need you to call somebody and everybody back up and whatever. Whereas some people, like, they'll be talking about it weeks later. It'll be the worst time of their life. So one of the things on the sociopathy quiz or test, on several of them, is apparently people that are like that really enjoy violence, and I despise it. I never think about hurting anybody. I think that that's just it's the worst thing in the world that human beings are still, in my opinion,
Yep.
still going to war. I never had any violent thoughts. I'm okay with violence, but I don't have violent thoughts. So that's the one thing I'm like, out of that whole criteria, that I was like, this doesn't fit me whatsoever. So this makes
But
more
now,
sense now, you know.
yeah, so now let's take it to a different degree. So like, I mean, let's just say someone was born wired towards sociopathy, which is again
Mhm.
what I don't believe to be the case for you. So if a person is wired towards sociopathy, what's going on for them is that they just don't have the ability to feel very empathetic towards others. And so maybe just maybe, and again, I'm just putting pieces together as such kind of thing, but like maybe just maybe the only way that they can really feel any kind of connection with another person is at the height of an emotion. When a person is going through something very, very intense. Like it's like if a person just goes, "Oh gosh, I had a bad day," the person is just like, "I have no clue what the fuck you're talking about." But if a person sits there going, I just got my arm cut off," they go, "My God, that must have hurt so much." I can kind of like connect with that. And so what happens is that it's in their brain, they're looking for that sense of connection to some degree. And so they start actually associating violence with a way to actually feel some form of connection or understanding of another person. Or in their brain, it fires off just a different set of neurons that aren't usually fired off. And this just, to me, again, just reemphasizes the fact that for you, that I don't believe that to be the case at all. I really strongly believe, and I can see it in you, like, I mean, just given what we're speaking about, like, it's not to say that you're not showing the traits of someone that's sociopathic, and I said it before and I'll say it again, as do I very often.
Mhm.
But it's, to me, the logic behind what's going on there is the fact that it's a little kid inside of yourself that's doing these things in order to protect itself.
It's so funny we got onto that, because that was just like a random thought from childhood, you know. And then again, like I said before, like my dad would have been, he's exactly 20 years older than me. So, you know, even, and he was raised, you know, in a small town by great parents, but, you know, like, to think that like, he wasn't registering anything that was going on in my head at the time. I mean, he was a kid
Of course.
himself. So it's funny that, like, just all those things, cycles continue like that, you know. But like you were
Yeah.
saying before, we're all hypnotized generationally.
And the thing I absolutely adore about what you're doing is that you're finally doing the things to break it. And then, I mean, like, please God, I don't really want to go there too much over a public thing, but like, I mean, maybe that will change your relationship with your son, for example. That as you
Yeah.
start healing these things inside of yourself, that it actually allows you to actually become a different person and to reconnect with people in a completely new way. But it
Mm.
will take for you to, for example, deal with that child inside of yourself. So the story that comes up for me, it's a bit long, but I'll try and truncate it as much as possible, was the first time I took ayahuasca.
Mm.
And so it's, for me, I right before I was taking ayahuasca, I was not in a very good place in my life, whatever it was, and I started having panic attacks. And what happens when you have panic attacks? The first thing you want to do is you get this feeling like you're going to die, and you try to get control over the situation. You're like, "Oh my God, I have to control the situation. Everything needs to be okay." And I realized that this was not a good way to be. And here I am, the hypnotist that should know better, and I couldn't really do anything about it, which is why at this point in time, once you hear the story, you'll understand why I actually so strongly believe in psychedelics at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was after you'd already been practicing so this wasn't like when
Yeah,
you
yeah.
were
So
like a
this was
like a like
2017. This was
okay, okay.
2000.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I just want to put it in perspective for everybody. So
Yeah.
you'd been well into your career, and you've known all the ins and outs. Okay, good deal.
I knew
Okay.
everything to do,
Yeah.
right? Like I should be better than this. And it's not to say I wasn't moving through it, but the panic was still there, and I wasn't dealing it with the right way. And to me, thank God, psychedelics actually made lots of shifts that now I can use with my clients in different ways. But at that point in time, I was dealing with panic attacks, and I was like, let's bring out the big kahuna. It's the exact same thing I want to do with people with GPRR, for example. So I was like, let's go to an ayahuasca retreat. So I found a church that did it legally in the States. It all worked out great. It was in Orlando. We go off to this church. And as I'm driving with my friend off to this church, me going through panic attacks and all the rest of it and trying to be in control of my life, I say to my friend, okay, fine. So what are our intentions for this? Because I wanted to be in control, I wrote down specifically what I wanted to get out of ayahuasca. I want to deal with this, and I want to deal with that, and I want to deal with this, because I had to be in control of the situation completely in every single way, shape, and form. I had to be in control of it. And so we get to the place, and I didn't necessarily have the best of experience with psychedelics in my past. So they say, okay, fine, this is your first time. We usually give people that come for the first time about a tablespoon and a half. How much do you want? I was like, I want half a tablespoon. Just half a tablespoon, just enough to experience it. Life is good. There's 3 ceremonies this event. We'll see after day 1 what it is. And so I remember so clearly, I was wearing my shorts, my piece of paper with all my intentions was on it. And I take my half a tablespoon and I lay down and I take my hand into my pocket and I'm holding the piece of paper the exact same way that nowadays I tell you, like I sleep with like my intentions behind my pillow so I can feel it. In the same way, like while I'm tripping, I want to have this piece of paper in my hand so I know what to deal with. I know what's going on. And all of a sudden these visuals start and I start having like this crazy experience, and it's kind of like nice. And as I'm having this crazy experience, this voice in my head is sitting there going, shut up about that. Focus in on your intentions. And I grab this piece of paper harder and I'm like, this is what I want to focus on. And so like I start getting like these different thoughts about the things I wrote down. And all of a sudden I start feeling like the only way I can describe it, I'm talking to myself. I've got thoughts in my own head, but it feels like it's a feminine energy. And a lot of people mention that about ayahuasca. I feel like it's a feminine energy that's giving me insights. Then my mind, because the medicine is kicking in stronger and stronger, as I keep going through these different experiences, and it starts giving me a few insights, and then I start drifting off into la la land. And the moment I realize I'm doing it, I grab back onto the piece of paper. I'm like, no drifting off to la la land. I need to focus in on this. And I start getting these different insights again. And this happens over and over again. So my brain drifts off to its own little place. And the moment I realize, I bring myself back down. I got to be in control of the situation. I got to do this. And I grab back onto the piece of paper and I'm like, this is what I want to focus on. And at some point in time, this voice in my head, this feminine energy says, so do you want bullshit answers or do you want to heal? And I was like, well, I guess, if you're putting it that way, no, I really want to heal. So it said, sit up and ask for the full dose. And I'm like, nope. Not doing that. No, none of that. I'm scared.
I would have done it. I would have been like, bring it over here. I'm one of those, nothing in moderation for me. I would have been like, bring that thing over here. Bring the whole tray. Yeah.
I was just like, no, this is just my brain playing tricks on me. This is how I die. Like this is because right now you're going through all this craziness. And so the voice just shuts up kind of thing. And I start drifting off into all these different places. And as I drift off, I'm again pulling myself back. Focus in on this question. Deal with your relationship with your father. Deal with the relationship of your fear. This is the stuff you want to deal with. And I keep drifting. And about like 15 minutes later, however long it is, because you don't really understand very much time at that moment. Again, the voice says to me, are you ready to do some healing? And I'm like, fine, fuck it. Okay, fine. I'll do some healing. It says, sit up and ask for the full dose. And they, like all the facilitators knew how scared I was. So I sit back up, I raise my hand, facilitator comes over thinking like, oh gosh, he probably needs a bathroom or something. And he goes, what do you need? And I go, can I please have the full dose? And he like looks at me like, you? I was like, just give me the damn full, like, yes. Okay, fine. This is what ayahuasca told me and I'm going to listen. Like I said, like for beginners, it was meant to be 2 tablespoons. I got half a tablespoon and the guy didn't really completely understand. So he gave me 2 additional tablespoons. So now I'm above the full dose for a starter. It wasn't actually that much for what it was. But the moment I lay down, because ayahuasca was already in my system from before, I start going, what a fucking idiot. Like that was a mistake. It's a completely wrong thing to do. This is completely the idiot thing to do. Like it's like you listen to that voice in your head, what an idiot you have.
This is
and
great.
I start freaking out. I start freaking out like crazy. And because I'm freaking out so much, I start having a panic attack. While under ayahuasca, I start having a panic attack. The ayahuasca now, the full dose starts kicking in. And as it starts kicking in, you're dealing with the strongest DMT, the strongest hallucinogen known to man. And as it starts kicking in, I'm having a panic attack. The thought while you're having a panic attack is, oh God, I'm dying. Now I'm on a strong hallucinogen. And I get this thought in my mind of, I am dying. This is not I lose track of the fact I'm having a panic attack. And I'm like, oh my God, I really am dying. And all of a sudden the voice in my head goes, that's it, you're done. And as I start having that, this is what very often people call the ego death. It's as that voice in my head says, that's it, you're done. I start having this enormous sense of sadness come up inside of me of like, oh my God, I had all these goals I wanted to accomplish in my life. And now I went and fucked it up by taking ayahuasca and killing myself. and all these things I wanted to do. And I didn't really tell my parents how much I love them. And I didn't get a chance to have the relationship I wanted. And I've got like this enormous sense of sadness. And as I've got this enormous sense of sadness of everything I messed up, the sadness, again, you're on a strong hallucinogen, you think you're dying, you've got this enormous sense of sadness. Start being pulled into like all these negative emotions. Like all my fears start coming up. And because you're on such a strong hallucinogen, I'm now convinced of the fact that I have died. And now I am no longer Ori Goldstein. I have died. Ori Goldstein has died. What I realize now is that this thing that we always thought was heaven was an absolute lie. All that happens is that you just get stuck in these emotions that you were experiencing before. So my emotions were emotions of sadness. And as I start having these emotions of sadness and fear, all of a sudden my brain starts messing with me and it starts imagining that I'm going into all these different realities, into different people's lives, kind of like reincarnation. And because sadness is driving me, the things I'm starting to imagine are the worst things in the world. A person in his last moment of committing suicide as the bullet goes through his head, a person jumping off a building and his head smashes on the ground, a child being molested. I'm starting to see all these terrible things, a person being hit by a car and feeling the glass tearing into their body. And I'm experiencing all this and I'm going through hell because a panic attack is still continuing. And I'm going through absolute hell. Just, I cannot get rid of these negative emotions. And the more I try to push them away, the stronger they become, because now I'm fighting them. And like we said, the unconscious mind doesn't know how to focus on negative. So when I say, I don't want to feel this, all I get is more of it. And I get more of these terrible emotions. It's like being beaten up, having bones broken and feel them snap. You name it, I went through like the most disgusting, horrid, gruesome stuff you could possibly imagine. The experiences of people ripping off your flesh and just all the craziness that your brain can go through. And it just kept on going and going and going, and there's nothing I could do about it. And at some point in time, as I'm going through all this hell, and to me, it felt like it went on for an eternity. At some point in time, I just kind of like went into this thought in my mind of like, fuck, if this is what eternity is going to be, like, I just have to accept it. Like, I fucked up. There's nothing else I can do right now. I fucked up. This is my eternity. There's nothing else I can do. I just have to surrender to this is what life is like on the other side. This is what my eternity will be like. And as I start really and the thought in my head was, I just give up. It's like, there's nothing else I can do. I completely give up. And I started giving up more and more. And as I started giving up more and more, what happened was these things I was pushing away so much, all of a sudden I wasn't pushing away against them so much. So they came through me and I experienced all these terrible things. And I was like, great, I'm getting raped again. Shit, now all of a sudden I'm this person that fell from a terrible height. Now I'm a person that made a terrible decision and decided to kill himself. Now I'm a person whose family abandoned him. And I'm going through all these things. But instead of fighting against them, I'm like, shit, what now? Shit, what now? Shit, what now? And at some point in time, the human brain just, it has enough of it. Pardon me. The brain just has enough of it that you go through so much of the hell that the surrender aspect finally comes along and you get this. And for me, what happened was at some point in time, I got the sense of everything is over. It's finally done. I've went through the hell. And I got this enormous sense of peace that finally overcame me. And there's obviously more to the story, but I kind of like want to stop here with the story right now because this is the part I want to get to you about that little kid, is that the moment that I stopped fighting against it and just completely surrendered into this is the worst possible thing that can happen. And I completely went into it completely. And I just didn't let anything, I didn't fight against anything because the more I fought against it, the more I got of it. And trust me, I tried fighting against it for a good hour first. It's not like I got there like instantly. I fought against it as hard as I could until I just gave up. But at some point in time, after fighting enough, I gave up. And what happened was, in giving up, my biggest issue with my panic attacks was trying to control everything. And the moment I gave up, the need to control went away. And all of a sudden, that child inside of me that felt like everything needed to be a certain way, otherwise he would be in trouble, otherwise everything would be dangerous, finally realized the fact that even if things went terribly wrong, on the other side of it, you're going to be okay. And so fast forward a couple of days after the experience, what ended up happening was that was the last time I had, obviously I spoke to you about the panic attack I had at the Vipassana retreat, but that was the last time I had a control style of panic attack, because the child inside of me finally, at a very, 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 very deep level, through the hell it had to go through to get there, finally understood the fact that the way to get over this was to understand the fact that even if the worst happens, I'm still going to exist. I'm still going to make it through. Consciousness will still survive. So a very, 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 very long story, but to bring it back to you, the whole idea here is the child inside of you, to take it to the depths of the ayahuasca inside of you, is a child that is literally terrified as I was of that death and losing control experience, is literally terrified of being alone. Because a 7-year-old, to him, being alone is absolute death. Is I'm not going to be able to survive this. There's nothing I can do on the other side of this. And what you need to do, and ideally without us having to go through a GPRR session, although if that's where it takes you, that's where it takes you. But what you eventually have to get to is that place of understanding that even if the worst happens, you're still going to be okay.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that wasn't a very good commercial for an ayahuasca experience for anybody who's listening.
So,
I'm sure
and I will say
wonderful things
no,
came out of it, but I appreciate your candor, because you know what? We hear people talk about ayahuasca experiences all the time, and most people say, everybody from Rogan all the way down to Sam Harris, and most people say, like, I can't explain it, like I can't describe what I saw. So the fact that you're like, that's powerful shit. So thanks for sharing that, because like people are going to be very interested, I'm sure. And I'm sure that wasn't the only thing you got out of it, but man, that sounds like a wild fucking ride, though.
But what I'll say is, it's the strongest commercial I could have for an ayahuasca experience. But don't
True.
expect you get, like, and I've said this to so many people, and I'm sure I've even said it to you. You don't get what you want, but you get what you need. I got exactly what I needed to get over my fear of control. The voice in my head was 100% right. As long as I was still around, I was going to try and control the experience, and I was going to hold on to that piece of paper and say, no, don't take me off here, go here. The moment I got that full dose, which is again why with GPRR, why we go for large doses.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment I got that full dose, I didn't have someone guiding me, so I had to make my way through it. But at the end of the day, I got exactly what I needed to get over my fear of control. It just went through hell. And so many people, they may not describe it, but many people that go through high dose ayahuasca or high dose psilocybin will discuss the same thing, which is what I would call the ego death. It's when you finally let go of everything and realize that you're still going to be okay. And the only thing I try to do differently right now with my clients is I know that they're going to go through it when we do high dose. So I set them up for it. So as it happens, we guide them through it in a healthy way so they actually feel safe and comfortable throughout. This is the best commercial there is for ayahuasca, because it tells you the truth, and it will also tell you you'll get what you need. But it may not be an enjoyable experience to get through there.
That's what I want. I want the wild ride, damn it. I want the wild ride.
Careful what you ask for, my dear friend.
We gotta do. Yeah, no, that's incredibly powerful, though. I mean, ayahuasca is like the freight train into your subconscious, because there's different levels of, like certain drugs do certain things, and that one's like the big one.
Yes, I mean, after experimentation, actually, I'll say that high dose psilocybin is actually, and I don't want to put this out there and say that everyone should be trying high dose psilocybin. It needs to be guided. It needs to be done the right way. But high dose psilocybin is actually much more powerful in certain ways, because it actually allows guided high dose psilocybin. Let's put it that way. So, and I think we've actually discussed this before, whereas I said ayahuasca has its own agenda, whereas high dose psilocybin doesn't necessarily have an agenda. So when you do high dose psilocybin in a guided way, you're so open, and you actually have the same kind of freight train open, that you can actually work with someone to actually reprogram the unconscious mind.
Okay, that makes sense then. So most people, when they do ayahuasca, it's more of just a self-discovery type thing, and then the psilocybin's more of like, we're actually gonna have a structured
when it's guided. So ayahuasca, what I've discovered is almost regardless what you want.
That's stupid.
To you too.
Yeah, I don't know.
Ayahuasca, almost regardless of what you want, it's going to give you what it feels you need. And I do feel that there's an intelligence there, and I know that a lot of people call that very woo-woo, but I do feel, like I said, it's almost like it's a feminine energy. It is a very specific energy, and it has an intention for where it wants you to go. And whether you like it or not, it will pull you in that direction. Psilocybin, I feel, is all about giving you knowledge, and it opens up the brain to new ways of thinking. So if you just take high dose psilocybin and you don't have someone guiding you, you could go down a really bad path and the walls start melting around you, and you don't have anything guiding you, not even the intention of a plant in this case. But when you have someone guiding you that you actually really trust, and that you've got a specific intention in mind, to me, the changes that occur on that level, I love ayahuasca for what it does, But to me, high dose psilocybin is actually the way to go for actually creating structured change within a person.
I'm excited to do all these things. I do all,
And
fill my
I'll
summer with
yeah.
all different types of experiences. But I mean, really, like any chance I get. I mean, not just for benefit of the viewers and people that are like joining the movement and everything else. But I really because of things that I want to work through. So yeah, if we get a chance to get me involved, and I mean, I'll never turn down. You put something in front of me, I'm like, yeah, give me that, I'll take it. Yeah, but even all joking aside, though, I would love to try, everything at least one time just to see just the benefits that come of it. And we hear so much about it, of course.
And as we
Carefully.
discussed, I want to take you to Jamaica, and I want to do a GPR series of sessions with you for you to actually see what it's about, because I think that A, it will transform you, and B, as a mouthpiece for human evolution movement, I want you to understand what it's about so you actually talk about it with intelligence. But
Yeah.
it's very, very powerful, but it's not something to be taken lightly. It's something that, again, I had to deal with a death experience. There was no two ways about it. I had to deal with the deepest fears inside of myself. And please God, those are the deepest fears inside of myself. If there's something else back there, I just wonder what else it could be. But it is extremely powerful, and it is life-changing when it's done right. But it all depends on having the correct set and setting to actually create it in the right way for you.
With all your experience, just working on this side of things and also doing it yourself, like different types of substances and everything else over the years. I imagine you've done everything a few times. I mean, I know like I've done a lot of recreational stuff, which I know doesn't count. But with all that experience now, so if you do it more than one time, is it something new every time? Like, is there some new issue, or does it even work like that?
So it's what I'll say is that every single time it's going to be unique, and sometimes uniqueness is the same as last time. It's like it's whatever is predominant in your mind, wherever your intention is set, wherever your energy is what's going to show up. So if you haven't dealt with something, it may show up a second time, third time, fourth time, fifth time, or it may take you in a completely different perspective to a completely different place. So, and that's the thing, like you have many people that, for example, do ayahuasca 8 different times, and they're like, I finally understand the plant. I get it now. Everything is so great. Then they go and they take even like a small dose of ayahuasca or psilocybin or something, and they have like the worst experience on the face of the planet. And they're like, oh God, I didn't realize that this happened to me when I was 3 kind of thing. The only thing that you know for a fact is that you are taking something that is opening up portions of your brain to experience things that you may not have ever experienced before. In that case, it may take you back to the same thought patterns you had before, or it may take you someplace completely new. There is no one size fits all answer to that. And there's times like, for example, that you do psilocybin and you just like, you know what, I took it and I didn't feel anything. And there's other times you take even a smaller dose of psilocybin and you're like, oh my God, I understand the meaning of the universe now.
I'm trying to decide how many stories I want to tell here, but at one time in particular, recreationally, it was a high enough dose that I just laughed all afternoon watching everything on the walls move. And this is a really dumb story. Like we were on such a roll there with like all this high energy mental health stuff. And now I'm going to tell a stupid story. But I remember the bathroom I had at the hotel I was staying in. I ended up peeing all over the place. I'm waiting for you to drink because the toilet kept moving on me, so I had to keep chasing the toilet. Like I haven't obviously done anything like it to the level we're discussing here, but yeah, it's funny. Like you take things at certain levels, like oh, this is just all fun and games, and then some people take it and they're like, that was the worst experience of my life. So, but I really am looking forward to trying, everything, just for out of curiosity and maybe now I'm here asking you like, what was this like, and what was it like this time, and did things change, and then we could get back on one of these after I have an experience and I can't describe it either.
Exactly.
So yeah.
And it's very, very hard to describe these things. It's very, very, very hard to describe these things. It's the only thing I'll say is the more I use it, the more reverence I have for it as a real medicine. It's like, a lot of people talk about it in terms of like, like it's a drug, it's a recreational drug. This is a really powerful medicine. It's like, it doesn't mess around. It's a straight shooter, and it will take you where you need to go. And if you take it in a recreational way, yeah, you might have fun, you might not. Like, there's I'd say 70% chance you'll have fun, 30% chance you won't, and end up peeing all over a hotel bathroom, for example.
Yeah. It's not a really
But-
good recreational drug in my experience, because the few times that I've done it, that I've taken psilocybin, and I've just you just kind of want to sit and watch things. I was like, okay. But the good thing is when it wears off, at least you're not hungover or have a come down or anything like that. That's wonderful. So
Yeah, if anything, it actually releases a bit more serotonin for most people. So like it's
yeah,
actually you end up feeling better.
yeah, for
And
sure.
so it's just like it's something that you just it's to me. I mean, it's when I was younger, I did use it recreationally a couple of times, really not that many, and every single time except for once, it was actually very, very enjoyable. The one time it wasn't enjoyable, it was really not enjoyable. But another time I
Mm.
was like in a field in Thailand thinking I was listening to the best DJ on the face of the planet. Meanwhile, it was just like a party of like 80 people in a freaking cornfield in Thailand. But I mean, if you had told me I was in Ibiza at the time, I would have believed you, you know? It's like I was having the time of my life. So it's like it's not to say it's not an enjoyable thing, but at this point in time, to me that almost degrades the the sanctity of what this can do for people, because I mean you
Yeah.
can completely transform a human being, get them in contact with their deepest, most evolved selves, and like it's just I mean it really is, to me it's almost a religious experience on some level what happens on the other side. It really you get in touch with a sense of awe inside of yourself that you didn't even know existed.
You'd almost hope that at a certain point in no pun intended in our human evolution, even maybe long after we're gone and dead, that maybe some things like this will be just a rite of passage, like they have bar mitzvahs and everything else. And they have maybe just as a human being, you'll just go through an organized, whatever they want to
Uh,
call it, as awesome as all this is. And as great as they're lightening up the laws and everything else and allowing it to be studied more and allowing some legalization or at least, non-criminalization or whatever, decriminalization of it. We're still a long ways from everybody being able to have access to it. And on the one hand, I'm like, yes, we're getting there. But on the other hand, I'm like, it's still so sad that it could be helpful to so many people and we're just not there yet. But we're in the right direction. So hopefully someday we get there, and hopefully it happens in
yeah.
our lifetime. So I don't know.
And to me, it's I mean, like we never spoke about it too much, and I don't really ever discuss it too much. But to me, that is actually the largest vision for human evolution movement, is that it actually does become some level of a sacrament to some degree. That it is something that is taken by people that after they learn enough to be able to use it correctly, to be able to get to that level. Like I mean, but that is a very, very large vision that we'll discuss at another point in time, very
Yeah.
possibly or possibly not. But like to me, it really is something that can completely transform a person's life and make them in contact, put them in contact with things inside of themselves that they didn't even know existed.
You never know. A couple of years from now, we could be holding large retreats somewhere, and maybe having to go testify before Congress. I don't know. I love it. I know we started talking about me going to this meditation retreat and everything else, and we ended up back on drugs, which is it's always a popular topic. But yeah, awesome information again. We learned a little bit about the sociopathy issue today, and some things I'm going to focus on the retreat. So aside from that, I think this is a great place to end, man. We'll do one more
Absolutely.
recording before I go in, and these will get released while I'm in. So we'll catch up in a couple of days, and to be continued.
Fantastic.
Hey everyone, it's Lee. Just one more thing before you go. If you've ever wondered if journaling could change your life, you can find out for free by downloading the Emotional Alchemy Journal from the link in the description. Also, if you're looking to connect with people who are just as passionate about growth as you are, check out our Facebook community. It's a great place to discuss what you've heard on the podcast and get access to exclusive content and sessions that are only available there. Just search for Human Evolution Movement on Facebook, or you can find the link in the description. Until next time, keep challenging the chaos within, be a little kinder to yourself, and let's continue to evolve together.